Revolution. When you hear that word, what comes to mind? Probably chaos, right? Violence, destruction. But what if that's only half the story? Today, we're going to look at revolution through the eyes of a few thinkers who didn't just see it as a necessary evil. They actually praised it. They argued it was a profound act of liberation. So, let's dig in and try to understand why.
We're going to kick things off with this quote from Michael Parenti because it just completely flips the script on how we usually think about this. I mean, we're often taught that revolution is the enemy of democracy and freedom. But Parenti here is arguing the exact opposite, that for people who have zero freedom, revolution is the start of democracy. This one idea is really the foundation for everything we're about to explore.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll ask, why would anyone praise revolution? Then we'll get into the reasons for revolt, the actual mechanics of the struggle, what it takes to forge a revolutionary, and finally, what the ultimate goal of it all is supposed to be.
All right, let's dive into part one. Praising revolution? It just sounds so counterintuitive, doesn't it? We link revolution with total instability and violence. So how on earth did these thinkers come to the conclusion that it was something to be, well, praised?
Okay, so here is the absolute core of the argument. They weren't advocating for creating violence out of thin air. Instead, they argued that deeply oppressive societies are already violent. The violence of poverty, of exploitation, of the state cracking down on its people, that's a daily reality. From this perspective, a revolution isn't the thing that introduces violence, it's the forceful response to a violence that's already there, that's literally baked into the system.
So if revolution is a response, what is it responding to? That brings us right to section 2, the diagnosis. What are the conditions that make a revolt seem not just like an option, but like an absolute necessity?
Michael Parenti lays this out with, just stark clarity. On one side, you have the pre-revolutionary regime. It's built on things like exploitative privilege for a few and economic oppression for the many. On the other side, the revolutionary goal is its polar opposite, mass empowerment and democratic development. So we're not talking about small tweaks here. This is about a complete flip of who holds the power.
And wow, George Jackson's words here, they just cut right to the emotional core of it all, This goes way beyond abstract political theory. He's framing revolution as an act born not just from desperation, but also from love. It's not some polite, cautious debate. It's a raw, visceral, human reaction to an unbearable life. It's the ultimate expression of refusal.
Okay, so we've got the diagnosis. But what about the prescription? If a society is fundamentally broken and unjust, how, according to these thinkers, do you even begin to change it? This brings us to the actual mechanics of the struggle.
This really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one thing to point out an unjust system. It's another thing entirely to figure out how you fight it, especially when that system has armies, police, and the entire power of the state on its side.
Well, Che Guevara had a pretty famous answer: guerrilla warfare. But he saw it as so much more than just a military tactic. It was political. The whole idea is that a small, incredibly dedicated group, what he calls the armed vanguard, can act as a kind of spark, winning over the support of the people and starting a massive transformation from the ground up.
And this quote, this is so key to understanding his view. It elevates the guerrilla fighter beyond just being a soldier. In Guevara's mind, this person is a social reformer. They only take up arms because every other option is gone, and in doing so, they become a living, breathing symbol of the people's anger and their demand for a just world.
George Jackson really expands on this with his concept of the vanguard. This isn't just a military group, it's the political and ideological heart of the movement. Their job is to lead, to teach, and, here's a really controversial part, to sometimes provoke the state into showing its true colors. The thinking is that when the state overreacts and becomes openly repressive, it'll wake more people up to the reality of their situation.
So we've talked about the why and the how, but what about the who? What actually turns an ordinary person into a revolutionary, someone who's willing to risk absolutely everything for the cause?
For many, like Angela Davis here, the whole journey begins with an idea. Reading the Communist Manifesto, that wasn't just an academic exercise for her. She describes it as a revelation, like a bolt of lightning. It suddenly gave her a framework, a language, to understand all the injustice she was seeing around her. It turned what felt like a bunch of random, unanswerable problems into a single, coherent picture. And for George Jackson, who was literally trapped inside the brutal system of a prison, these ideas were a lifeline. He says that these thinkers redeemed him. It's an incredible statement. They helped him reframe his own identity. He went from seeing himself as a criminal to seeing himself as a political prisoner, a revolutionary.
It gave his personal struggle a purpose, a global context.
But, and this is a massive but, this transformation comes at an almost unimaginable cost. To choose to become a revolutionary is to choose to become a target. It means accepting that the entire power of the state is now aimed squarely at you. As Jackson puts it so chillingly, it is to become a doomed man.
And that leads us to our final and maybe most important question. After all that struggle, all that sacrifice, all that violence, what was it all for? What was the end game? What was the ultimate goal?
Because for these thinkers, revolution was never, ever the end goal in itself. Tearing down the old system, that was just step one. That was just clearing the land. The real work, the much, much harder work, was to build something totally new in its place, a society that wasn't based on profit and power, but on fundamentally more humane relationships between all people.
This quote from the preface to George Jackson's final book just brings it all home. It's a call to action, but look at how it's framed. It's rooted in discovering your humanity and your love inside the struggle. It's a charge to pass the torch, to keep fighting not just out of anger, but out of a deep desire for a better, more human world.
So where does this all leave us? These are difficult, really radical ideas, born from some truly extreme situations. For the thinkers we've talked about, revolution felt like the only logical answer to the violence they saw in their world. The question for us today isn't necessarily whether we agree with their answer. It's what we can learn from their diagnosis. What does it really mean to confront a system you believe is fundamentally unjust?